Hi, my name is Dennis Reed. I'm co-owner of Art Shack Art Supplies in Dieppe, New Brunswick. And today we're going to talk a little bit about acrylic mediums. But first, we just need to kind of just talk a little bit about acrylic paint. Acrylic paint is made from acrylic pigment, acrylic polymer, and water. And obviously, the pigment's giving us the color. The acrylic polymer is what's going to bind it together, and the water is what's keeping it from hardening. So what often happens when someone starts painting with acrylic, typically they don't use a whole lot of mediums because it's a water-based paint. They think that I just mix it down with water in the same way that you would with watercolors. But the problem is it isn't quite the same. What happens when you start painting acrylic and you're just using water, you start running into a couple problems. Manufacturers of acrylic paint will often recommend that you can add up to about 25% by volume of water when you're painting. So that means, say you take a little bit of paint out of your tube, squirt it on your palette, you have 2 or 3 colors going, and you want to thin it down, you can add 25% by volume of water. Now, it doesn't mean that you're measuring, but that's kind of what they recommend. To me, that seems like a little bit much. I usually, when people come in the store, we tell people, stick to about 10%. The reason being, you get a couple of problems that happen when you start adding too much water. When you start adding a lot of water, you find that you're working on a canvas which is flexible. So as you're adding more water to your paint, you're dispersing that paint. It's going farther, but you're also reducing the amount of acrylic polymer there. So it makes the paint less adhesive, and it makes it more brittle. So you'll find that paintings that someone's gone and actually really thinned down the paint a lot. You can actually take your fingernail and actually scratch that paint and scratch the paint off. The other thing that happens is that if you're doing an acrylic painting and you're doing it almost in the same way that you would do a watercolor, you're doing like a wash, and you're just adding water to your paint, you'll find that the colors are matting down. Now this is like a natural thing that happens with acrylic paint. As the paint, and a lot of paints, as the paint dries down, it loses some of its vibrancy. But this especially happens if you're really adding a lot of water. It's the acrylic polymer that not only gives it the adhesion, but it also gives it its gloss. It gives it its glow. So sometimes you'll hear someone say, "Oh, that acrylic painting, doesn't look as vibrant as an oil paint." Well, in an oil paint, it's the binder as well that gives it its gloss. It's the linseed oil, and in the same way that in acrylic painting, it's the acrylic polymer. So you're doing two things. You're doing you're thinning down your acrylic with that water, and it's losing its gloss. It's not as adhesive, and it's also going to take you longer, because what's going to happen is as you're painting, say you sit down and you paint for an hour, and you're doing wash after wash, and you stand up from your painting and you say, "Wow, I'm a genius. This is the best painting ever." And you walk away from it and you think you're done. Next morning you go down, you look at your painting, it's all dry, and you go, "Oh, the colors have changed. It's matted down," and it'll matte down a lot. Because what's happened is you don't have that acrylic polymer there giving it its vibrancy anymore. You've added too much water. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is acrylic mediums. Acrylic paint is great. They've got all different types of mediums. They've got acrylic polymers or acrylic medium. Often when you hear anything called a polymer, what they're like in terms of a painting medium, the polymers are the fluid ones. So they're almost like a little bit more liquidy than an Elmer's white glue. Then you have your gels, which are just a little thicker, and then you have things like modeling paste, and then you get into the special mediums that some of them will have sand or different kind of maybe glass bits in them, or whatever the manufacturer can think of to throw in there. So let's start talking about the specific acrylic mediums. As I mentioned, there's your polymer mediums, or your regular gloss and matte mediums. Gloss being the glossy one, and then your matte being your matte. Those are the ones that, as I was talking about, you should be using instead of just the water. They're gonna do those things I talked about. They're going to give you the shine in your paint. They're going to make the paint. They're going to keep the paint adhering properly to your canvas, and they're going to keep it from flaking off. So that's the more fluid one. You can actually you'll know right away. You hold it in your hand. It shakes. You can feel it kind of shaking around inside. So those are your. A lot of times people will just refer to them as matte mediums or acrylic mediums. So just when you go into your local art store and you're looking at them, they're the fluid ones. As well, there's the gloss or the gel ones. Sorry, your gels are a little thicker, and they're really quite amazing. You can mix them in with your paint. They're thicker, and you can actually use them to glue stuff down, to glue photos down, to do all kinds of collage into your acrylic paintings. I guess the other thing that you're going to notice is that they are white, and that goes for this right here. That goes for your polymers. But they dry transparent. You're using such small amounts of them that they're really not going to have any effect in your color, although you think they will, but they don't. As you mix them in, you'll see they just disperse, and once they thin out, they really don't. The other one is that's really quite common is your modeling paste. Now your modeling pastes are white and they're opaque. They stay white. Often artists are using modeling paste when they're trying to build up a surface. Some artists will tint it in the same way that you're tinting a gesso, but quite often they're just laying it down white and they're building up and doing whatever kind of texture they want. Quite often the modeling paste come in just regular modeling paste, and some companies will do one that's called the flexible modeling paste. The reason being that often artists were painting on canvas, and the canvas is flexible, so it's just made so that it doesn't crack, because you are putting on areas that can be half-inch thick, 3/4 inch thick, like having peaks especially if you're working with palette knives and such. So then you get into some of the specialty ones like I talked about before, but really those are the main ones. So your polymers, your fluid ones, your gels, and your modeling paste. So that about wraps it up for our little talk on acrylic mediums. If you have any questions, you can contact us or see us online at www.artshack.ca. But in the meantime, how have you been using acrylic mediums? Hopefully you have been, and if not, you've got a little more knowledge now to understand when you go into your art store and you see what's being used. So let us know what you've been using, and let us know how you've been using it. We'd love to hear. So like I said, www.artshack.ca. Thank you for listening. Bye.